Good afternoon. Today's lecture is on World War I and America's involvement. In 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip. He was a Bosnian Serb student. He was assassinated, and then Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia. Then 2 days later, they declared war on France. And then when Germany invaded Belgium, Great Britain declared war on Germany. So back home in the United States, they thought everybody had gone mad in Europe, and they were just like, "What is going on in Europe? They're going crazy, And for the most part, most of the people wanted to stay out of it. They wanted to be isolationists and say, hey, that's Europe's problem. That's not America's problem. We just need to stay out of that. And Woodrow Wilson believed that. At first, he believed it, and he thought that, yeah, it's probably best that we stay out of that conflict in Europe because they thought all of Europe had gone mad, with the war. However, as time went on, the sinking of the Lusitania, which was a passenger ship, got people in a fervor in the United States, and some people started to bang the war drum a little bit more, but still most people thought, hey, we still need to stay out of that conflict. And then it wasn't until Germany had agreed to limit their submarine warfare and not attack civilian liners and things like that. But then when peace negotiations broke down, they decided to go back to attacking any ship that came within their contact. So they were going to sink any ship that was associated with allies, which was whether passenger or military or anything like that. And that really drove Woodrow Wilson crazy. And he's like, well, this really isn't right. And then when they got wind of Germany trying to get Mexico to form a pact with Germany to go against the United States, that was almost like the last straw. And Woodrow Wilson turned from trying to negotiate a peace in Europe to saying, hey, we're probably going to have to go to war before this is over. He tried to negotiate peace, but it wasn't working out. And he wasn't going to have full out submarine, Germans running U-boats all in the Atlantic, destroying American shipping and things like that. So he was kind of was swayed in the way to ask for declaration of war. So in 1918, he asked Congress for a declaration of war, and it was given to him. Now, back here at home, a lot of the people were still isolationists. So Woodrow Wilson had to come up with a plan to persuade the American people. He had to sell the war to the American people because he was an isolationist at first. And people were like, well, wait a minute. Now, first you wanted to stay out of the war. Now you want to go in the war. What's going on? Well, he started the Committee on Public Information, and they published posters and pamphlets and newspaper articles. And they had what they called the 4-Minute Men. Now, the 4-Minute Men would go around the country, speaking, approximately 4 minutes, trying to persuade the American people that the right thing to do is to go to war. And it took a lot of persuading because a lot of the moms back home were like, wait a minute, why am I sending my son over there to fight in a war that's way off over there? It's an ocean away. We have nothing really to do with it. So it took a lot of persuading. So his committee on public information did all the propaganda of advertising the war and getting people on the side. They also did the Uncle Sam Wants You posters, for the men that were going to be joining up. now, but a lot of this, a lot of this rhetoric and things caused a deep anti-sentiment, among the population here, throughout the country. People were like really coming against Germany and the German people, the German people that were here in the United States that were American citizens. They were beginning to be discriminated against. So in 1918, Woodrow Wilson sent over the Allied Expeditionary Force led by General Pershing. Now there was a lot of people that were still against the war and saying, "Hey, we don't need to be involved in this." And one of the big proponents against the war was a fellow by the name of Eugene Dobbs. Now, Eugene Dobbs had run he was a politician. He had run for president in 1912, but he had lost. But he was still speaking out against the war. And Woodrow Wilson didn't like this. There was still a lot of people speaking out against war. So in 1917 and 1918, they passed the Espionage and Sedition Acts, which limited people's speech. It limited their freedom of speech because they weren't allowed to speak wrongly of the war. And actually, Debs ended up getting a 10-year sentence because he was going around the country and speaking harshly on the war and say, "Hey, we don't need to be involved in it." And so he was tried under the Sedition Act and was given a 10-year sentence. So there was a lot of things back at home where they had to try to influence the people to get them, to even the mothers, to get the mothers to give up their sons, to let their sons join up and go fight in a war that was, far away. And so his Committee on Public Information ramped up, and then the Sedition Acts and the Espionage Acts kind of dampened the kind of squashed the people from talking against the war, and so they were able to go to war, and then so the American Expeditionary Force in Europe, Germany knew the United States, once they got involved, they could just throw so much armament and so many men at it, that even though, the Americans were involved in some of the battles, a few battles once they got over there, Germany realized that, hey, United States they've got so much industrial might and they can provide so much manpower that it if we couldn't go on, we couldn't last, we were going to have to give it up. So eventually Germany surrendered, and that was the end of World War One. But back at home on the home front, a lot of the people were still isolationists and still believed we shouldn't have been in that war. And but the Wilson administration did everything they could do to once he went from isolationist thinking and figured he would have to go to war. The Committee on Public Information, turned the tide, and then the Sedition and Espionage Acts were made to squelch people's freedom of speech to talk, or as far as talking out against the war. Now there was a lot of other things that happened that were that was anti-German sentiment. Like there was one time at the University of Michigan, they had German professors, and a lot of those German professors lost their jobs over it, and they were never hired back because. And even though at the time Ann Arbor was it wasn't founded by Germans, but there was a lot of presence of a lot of German people there in Ann Arbor at the time, and these professors pretty much lost their jobs for no reason, and they were never hired back. So a lot of the country really treated the German, American citizens that were of German descent, treated them pretty badly. But that's a lecture on the United States involvement in World War One. Thank you. Have a great day.